Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Cervantes podcast. Joining me today for another episode to discuss being Afro-Latino, what Afro-Latino really means, stereotypes, and what we love most about our culture is finance major studying at SUNY Old Westbury, Jaden Blackwood, and Hofstra University alumna, double majoring in psychology and neuroscience, Keeana Quiñones. How are you guys? How are you doing?
I'm great.
I'm good.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Do you guys refer to yourself as Black, Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latino, Afro-Latinx, mixed?
So me personally, I guess when I hear that question, I guess it depends on whether you're talking about race or ethnicity. For me personally, my race is black. Like at the end of the day, if someone asks me, "Oh, like what are you?" I'm black. Period.
Right.
But now, if we want to get into ethnicity, then I'll probably break it down and be like, "Well, my father is Panamanian and my mother is Jamaican, so I consider myself half Panamanian, half Jamaican, basically." So yeah, that's
Right.
probably how to answer the question.
Okay.
And you, Kiana?
I had a little bit of a journey with this actually.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I
You
used to
tell.
yeah, I always used to just identify as like Latina. Because I had never really heard much about the whole like Afro-Latina because I was raised in Puerto Rico. So when I used to hear that, I was like, oh, I automatically assumed that it must mean that I was like half black, like American black. And I was like, oh no, that's not what I am. Like what I am is half Dominican, half Puerto Rican. But with time, when I started to realize like, oh, I think this is what it means now, I would definitely identify as Afro-Latina because my father, he has very African features. He looks like a black man, but then my mom, she has more European features. So I'm just like, I guess like if I had to call myself something, I would definitely be like Afro-Latina. But yeah, it
Right.
wasn't
'Cause I
I
feel,
started to learn more. I was like, oh.
yeah. Because I feel like the term Afro-Latino, Afro-Latina, I think that's a relatively new term.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
us in our community, we just call ourselves Black or we just call ourselves, Latino or whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool that we kind of, I guess, have a new term for people who don't know or understand. So Kiana, you're Puerto Rican and Dominican, like you said. How has that experience been for you?
Ooh, a journey. Yeah.
Loaded question.
It is a very loaded question. Well, it's been a journey first and foremost because there is this thing that where people say that like Puerto Ricans and Dominicans have beef with each other. So it was always low key a little bit awkward. My family never actively had any beef with each other, but I would always hear that. But I did
Yeah.
hear like I would get a different energy from like strangers. So when people would look at me, they would almost always, at least here in the States, they would always look at me and they would be like, oh, like you're Dominican. I was like, oh yeah, like I am. But then when I would start to speak, I sound hella Puerto Rican. So then they're like, hold up, like you're Boricua. And I was like, yeah, I'm Boricua. And then they were like, oh, like if it was Dominicans, they were just like,
Yikes.
yeah.
I don't like that. Okay.
Puerto Ricans, they were usually a little bit more chill. They were just like, oh, like cool, like what part are you from, and so on. So that's like one little piece of the experience. The other side, I would say, of being both that's been very interesting is that in Puerto Rico, at least the area where I'm from, Jauco, we do have like all sorts of looking, individuals. Like some people look black, some people look more indigenous, some people look more white. Some of them just look mixed like me. But I would say like the majority was very light skinned. So for example, like in my friend group, I was one of the darkest ones always.
Wow.
Um, yeah, which to me was like a whole shocker when I came over here to the States and they're like, oh my God, you're light. And I was like, I'm light. Like, what? I was like, I am dark. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so that was definitely an experience for me because I would not really see a lot of people that had like African features around me. And even those people that did have African features, they usually tried to like I don't think that they consciously tried to tame them down, but for example, like they would try to stay out of the sun, they were always trying to straighten out their hair. Like the whole idea of like European looking people was just like so romanticized. Like I had a few friends that just because they were blonde and like blue eyed, they were just like, oh my God, like your friend is so beautiful, which oh my God, like 100% she is. But like at the same time, I was like, but like just because of blue eyes, like I don't know, it was an interesting, like,
Right. It's like the
yeah,
Eurocentric beauty standards.
yeah. And then everything that people wanted to avoid, like also their I guess like vocabulary for certain things, like when they had curly hair. Sometimes it could literally just be like loose curly hair. They would immediately say that they had like kinky hair. And I was like, what? Like, like that
That
makes sense.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So I think it also forced me to like have to put in the like my own my own effort, I guess, into studying what it means to be like Dominican, Puerto Rican, and so on, because I didn't see a lot of people that look like me over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And learning how to like embrace both. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Jaden, you're Jamaican and Panamanian, like you said.
Yes.
How has that been for you?
Honestly, it's been great. I love being part of like both cultures. It's just like it's interesting. My dad's Panamanian, so when I go to his side of the family, it's way different than when I go to my mom's side, which is more Jamaican. Um,
Right.
Me personally, I grew up in a predominantly white kind of area. I went to a predominantly white high school, and even the kids that were black that went to my high school, they were kind of more of like just sorry, they were just kind of more of an American black. Like, so they weren't really Caribbean at all. I didn't really see any Caribbeans until I went to college. Like, that was a big thing for me. So,
Wow. Okay.
growing up, like, there's certain stuff that like people just wouldn't understand that I did, because they're not like involved in that culture. So it was like, I kind of kept it. I guess I kind of kept it suppressed, kind of like what I like to do, like with my
Like kind of
families and
low
stuff,
key.
because like a lot of people can really relate to like, oh well, you do that, like, oh well, I don't know what that is, like,
Right. Or like, I
But it
eat
wasn't
this.
until I got to
Why do you
college.
eat that? Yeah.
Yeah, and then when I got to college, I saw it was mad Jamaicans, mad Panamanians, like all types of cultures, and it just was like, oh wow, like there's people like me, I'm able to talk to them about
I
all
can
different
relate.
experiences. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was definitely that's definitely something I liked. But yeah, being Jamaican and Panamanian, like you get to see like how different cultures combine, and also the things that are different. Like, for instance, like my mom, she'll make plantains. Like, and so Jamaicans call plantain like plantain. I know some people say plantain, or
Right.
other Panamanians, they call plantain platanos. So
Yes. Plátanos.
like
Yeah.
platanos, I think Dominicans, I think I say tostones. I'm pretty
No,
sure.
we also say plátanos. It's
Oh, you
only
say platanos
where
too.
my
All
dad
right.
still.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. Somewhat. I forgot what other Spanish country they say tostones.
Is tostones something else?
Tostones is a way that you make the plantain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a
okay.
Oh,
dish
okay.
in a way.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
copy. Okay, yeah.
Kind of
See,
like saying
so
you can have a potato, but then there's a French fry like that.
oh, okay,
Oh, that
okay.
makes sense. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so just like little things like that. Like, it's just interesting how different cultures prepare the same dish but call it a different name. So I just
Right.
think,
Right.
yeah, that's very cool.
I also got a lot of that when I was growing up, so I definitely relate on that. Like, there's this thing like Dominicans and Puerto Ricans, they tend to have very similar dishes that they make.
Mhm.
But for example, when it comes to rice, there's like the bottom part of the pot, which is like a little crunchier. So Puerto
Yeah,
Ricans call it pegao, which just means like sticky, and then the Dominicans they would call it con con. So even when I was little, and even
definitely
though I
heard of
saw
that.
both sides of my family like a decent amount of the time, I would still sometimes be lost in the vocabulary. Like I went to Dominican Republic 2 years ago. It was all pre-COVID, obviously. And I went to DR with my grandmother, my Dominican grandmother, and I hadn't been to DR since I was a year old. And where there's the speed bumps in Puerto Rico, you call them muertos, which means like the dead, essentially, because it's like if somebody's buried in there. So then when I was in DR, somebody told me that it was a un policía para, like a policeman that's standing, and I kept on
Wow.
looking around and I was like, where's the police? And I couldn't see it. And then my grandmother's friend, she was like, what is she looking for? And my grandma was like, I don't know. She was like, Kiana, what are you looking for? And I was like, they keep talking about the police. Like, where's the police? And she was like, Kiana, it's a speed bump. And I was like, hold up. And I was like, that's what I call like un muerto, like a dead person. And they were like, oh my gosh, that's so morbid. And I was like, I'm here thinking that I'm being watched.
That's so funny. Like
Yeah.
the different terminologies. Because I think Dominicans they have a very distinct, it's the same language, but a distinct like way of speaking, dialect. Yeah, that's what yeah. Whereas Puerto Ricans, it's different. So it's
Yeah.
learning the vocabulary and like trying to communicate with both people and both communities is very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, is it, I know for me, like being Jamaican and Puerto Rican, it's been kind of hard because those are very distinct cultures and very
Yeah.
different. And because like I don't stereotypically look Puerto Rican, sometimes it's harder when I
Mhm.
meet like not family but strangers that are Puerto Rican. It's like, oh, like are you really Puerto Rican? And when I meet
Mhm.
Jamaican people, it's like it's more they're a little bit more accepting. But because I don't know patois, it's
Mhm.
like, oh, you're not a real Jamaican. So it's that balance of like we have to kind of break the narrative of like this is what
Yeah.
a Jamaican sounds and looks like. This is what a Puerto
Yeah.
Rican sounds and looks like. Being that us three we're all like mixed with two different ones. Do you guys ever felt like you leaned to one side more than the other? Like more Dominican than Puerto Rican or more Jamaican than Panamanian?
Yeah. Oh, you want to answer, Key?
Oh, you go first.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I definitely lean more of my Jamaican side. If I'm always around my mom's side. I'm around my dad's side, but not as much as like my cousins. The cousins that I have are around my age are Jamaican, so like I'm always with them, hanging out with them. Honestly, and I always tell my dad this. I'm like, I don't know why he didn't teach me Spanish when I was younger. Like, I don't know. I think there was like a thing where like, I don't know. I guess he didn't want me speaking Spanish. I don't know what it was, but I always told him like, "Yo, why didn't you teach me Spanish? Why?" Because he speaks Spanish and my grandmother speaks Spanish, so it's like him not teaching it to me. I felt like I couldn't really fully connect with my Panamanian side, if that kind of makes sense, because it's like I don't know Spanish, and it's kind of like just I'm always around my Jamaican side, so it's just it's kind of funny.
Like a disconnect. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and my middle school and high school Spanish class did not help.
It's a shame. I hear that so much. I'm like, damn, that sucks.
Yeah, and yeah, I just wish my dad taught me when I was younger. That definitely I think would have helped me connect. I feel more on my Panamanian side.
Yeah, I can totally relate. My mom, I think it's because I don't want to blame it on her because I definitely could have.
Nah, I'm blaming my dad. He could have taught me. Like, why didn't you teach me? Like, I understand. Like it's a whole nut, and it's so important now because anytime when I apply for jobs, they're like, "Are you?
Oh,
You have
they
a dual
ask.
language? Do you speak Spanish?" Like, because it's just so big now. Like, I just
Right. It's like the second major language in this country. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So it definitely would have been good to know because it's harder to learn languages when you're older. Like when you're young,
The older we
you
get,
to just pick up and boom, you just speak it, and then. But
that's
yeah, he never taught me. So.
that's so true. I wish my mom taught me. Like, I wish I took it more serious when I was younger when she was trying to speak to me. Because I have a lot of aunts and cousins that don't know English very well, and I kind of have to pull out the
Yes.
Google Translate and
Yeah,
or
my
ask my
grandmother knows only Spanish, so when I
right,
when I talk to her, it's like I have to, oh hola,
right. So I
yeah,
definitely want to learn one day because it's part of my culture, and I think
exactly,
I think obviously growing up in Puerto Rico and not having really gone to DR definitely played a part in things. So I definitely feel like I tend to lean a lot more on like my Puerto Rican side because I sound Puerto Rican. Like the things that I kind of know are very Puerto Rican. Like the music I listen to. I mean, Dominicans also listen to similar things, but even I don't know. I feel like I have this like I don't know. I just feel very Puerto Rican, and I feel like when I'm around Dominicans, I still feel like an outcast at times because I don't act like a stereotypical Dominican. Like Dominicans, they love to party like crazy, and don't get me wrong, I do too. But I feel like I'm
you're
a
more
little bit more, yeah, like a little bit more chill. I'm a lot more of like I care more about the company and so on, and that's like what gets me going. Versus, I feel like Dominicans like they bring the party with them, and a lot of Puerto Ricans are also like that. But I don't know if it's because of the area that I grew up in. I was just very close to like being within my circle. Um,
chill.
yeah, but I definitely feel like I leaned a little bit more on the Puerto Rican side. Also because Puerto Ricans are a little bit more Americanized due to being like a US territory. So I was very used to that. Like when I went to DR, there was a lot of things that I wasn't particularly like accustomed to. Um and not just that, but also like I feel like now like that I moved over here, I have a lot of Dominican friends, and now I feel like I'm like becoming more in touch with my Dominican side where I'm like, oh shoot, hold up. Like I'm definitely into this. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
It
good.
just
That's
yeah.
good.
wasn't,
That was like me. Yeah, when I first got to college, I met mad Jamaicans. I was like,
yeah.
yo, like
I
I
think
felt like I was,
Feel like you're
part of
home.
the family. Yeah,
yeah,
like
I,
I was
I
like, yo,
just
I'm
think I
home.
wasn't really exposed to it for me
Yeah,
to ever say like, oh yeah, like this is what I lean towards, if that makes sense. But now that I have like my friends that are like a good amount of them, they are Dominican, like I feel like I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But I do admit, which is ironic, but I still have not met a Puerto Rican here in the US, like in the actual like US territory that I have been able to become friends. Well, I mean, except with Cervantes, but you know what I mean? Like a
Yeah.
native Puerto Rican, like from the island, I haven't met anybody yet.
Oh, okay.
Weird considering that
yeah,
there's so many Puerto Ricans all over here, but I have yet to make a connection with any one of them, which is like it's not a bad thing. Like don't get me wrong, I love all my friends and I love everything. But at the same
Right.
time, it would be really freaking cool to have somebody that like I could
Like from
speak
the island.
and they get what I'm talking about. Like
Right.
there obviously are the American Puerto Ricans, but I really crave meeting somebody that's from the island, and to get to talk to them and so on. Like even some of my friends that are like, let's say if I meet somebody that's like half Puerto Rican and stuff, I'm like, oh, where's your grandma? Like I want to talk to your grandma. She's from
Right.
talk about things.
Don't talk to me. Talk to my abuela.
Yeah, like so many
Right.
people just like there's such a disconnect.
Yeah. Do you feel like sometimes native Puerto Ricans they kind of like lose their Spanish a little bit? Because my mom, she's from San Juan, but she came
Mhm.
to America when she was 12, and she kind of immersed herself in Black American culture. Like she met my dad, all her friends are Black American or Jamaican, and I feel like she kind of lost her Spanish a little bit. So I wanted to ask you, like, do you feel like native Puerto Ricans when they come here, it's like they lose it, like their culture a little bit?
I definitely think that they like I want to try to like use my terms very carefully here. I don't want to offend anybody.
Right.
But I think when people move over here before a certain age, like I moved over here when I was 18 officially. Um, but I think that a few people that I have met that, let's say, moved to New York or to the States in general, like earlier on, like 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, I do believe that they are a little bit more like American like. I honestly attribute some of that maybe just because that's around the time like when they hit puberty. So I'm sure that that like has to do with like, you know, the developing years and how they behave and how they interpret the world versus me. I was in PR the whole time. So even some people that I've met over here, they're like, oh yeah, I moved over here when I was like 8 years old, 9 years old. Like they don't give me like, even them being Dominican, they don't give me like a I'm a completely like, you know, native Dominican. I feel like they're more like I'm from the Bronx, I'm from Queens, like that. That's
Yeah.
like the vibe that I get. Like, okay, I get like your New Yorker Hispanic vibe, but I don't get like the full blown I'm from the island vibe. So
Yeah.
I personally have not gotten that yet because everybody that I've met has been more like your mom that came a little bit early on. I think the only other person that I know is my grandmother that lives here in New York, but she's Dominican and she moved over here when she was 18. So I feel like she's literally probably the only person that I relate to that when we speak about like things about like, you know, being from the island, even though she was from DR and I was raised in Puerto Rico, there's just things that like she and I we connect on that we're like, this is an island thing. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
You
But I
guys
think
can
it
click.
was just never affected because she moved over here so much later on, like at 18, 19 years old, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting how that works. Like, when you move, who you surround yourself with, it's very interesting.
Mhm.
Sometimes in television and in movies, we see only one type of Latino. Sometimes a woman that looks like Sofia Vergara or Jennifer Lopez, or a guy that looks like William Levy or Mark Anthony. As a result of this, society thinks that's what all Latinos look like, when in actuality, Latinos come in all different colors. How do you guys think we can solve this problem?
I think for me, it's definitely like giving people the option to play the parts because I know I've seen in some interviews like some people that looked a lot more white and not even like I guess like the stereotypical like Hispanic curves and the long hair and tan skin. They were often rejected for like roles because they were like, oh, you don't look Hispanic enough. And same thing like if they look too African, they were like, oh no, like you don't look Hispanic enough, which is ironic because it's like what. But I think that it's just a matter of like them like people that are have these positions where they can give these opportunities to people, definitely giving them the space to, hey, do it, let's see what this is actually like, because if you're not given the stage, it's like how can you ever share the story, you know?
Right, right. Like it's gonna come to the point where we might have to make our own stories and not leave it up to Hollywood.
Yeah,
We're gonna have to make our own movies and TV shows. Yeah, Jane.
yeah.
Definitely what Keanu was saying, give people a chance. Like, I feel like, a lot of times, like you said, like people think of Spanish and think of just one certain way of how Spanish will look when that's absolutely not the case. Like, for instance, like, in Brazil, like when you see stuff on Brazil TV, they always show white looking Spanish people like in their TV or whatever thing they got going on. But when you really think about it, Brazil has the largest amount of black people outside of Africa. This was the second largest country with black people in it. So,
Right,
but you would never know because they never portray that. Like they always portray like that white looking Spanish person, which that's yeah.
right. Like they Americans think Brazil and they think of Tom Brady's wife, Giselle.
Yeah, exactly. And it's pretty
And
funny.
that's
Like
not
even
that.
I was watching I don't know if you guys watch Insecure on HBO.
Yeah,
Insecure. Oh, great show. About to definitely check it out. Great show. But there's a character named Dro on the show, and I was watching an interview with him. I forgot his name, but he plays the character Dro, and he was Panamanian. And like I was like, oh shoot, like that was the first time I ever seen like a Panamanian like kind of like a known TV show that like had a good role. Like so,
Yeah,
and he talks
I
about
think
that. Like he says, and in Panama, there's a lot of people that look like me and Cervantes. Like there's like a lot of black people, but like people wouldn't really think about it like that because it's not portrayed out there like that. You know what I mean?
Right. Representation
So
matters.
yeah, I think representation is a big thing. Like I think, and I like that, like you said, people, um, like certain celebrities, they'll come out and be like, I'm black and Spanish, you know,
Yeah.
that, like, which I think is important. Like people should know, like, oh yeah, just because even though I'm Spanish comes in all shades. So,
Mm-hmm.
you could be,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something. More representation is what
Yes.
I
is
also would
needed to.
really like, me personally, again, like since I was raised in PR, I saw a lot of like Spanish shows, so like a lot of telenovelas constantly.
Yeah.
So I think in addition to representation, I think also roles that do not make like more African looking people or indigenous looking people constantly the help. I am so sick and tired of seeing that.
Yes.
My
Yes.
goodness. I think
Or make
only
them the bad guy.
The
literally, I think
criminal.
only
Yeah.
once I saw one woman that looked somewhat indigenous and she was like the main character. But all the time, it's always like we're like the help, or if not like the enemy, or if not the poor person, which yes, like we everybody comes from everywhere, but at the same time, like not like the main character does not always have to be like some European looking person. Like there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like we have plenty of content like that. Like let's try to move things
I remember
along.
Amada La Negra talked about that. Like the only roles when she would apply for like Univision and Telemundo stuff, the only role she would get, like you said, was the criminal, the maid, and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And that's not fair because
No.
it sets a false idea that like okay, the love interest and the main character is only like only white stories matter. You know,
Yeah,
and if you don't
pretty
see
much.
Yeah.
yourself represented, it's like I'm not beautiful, I'm not smart, I'm not worthy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even at one time I remember in high school we were doing like this play, and there it was like supposed to be like this Christmas related play, and the part of the story was like when Americans came into Puerto Rico and how things became more Americanized. And literally the teacher, like the one in charge of doing the play, it was just a class. It wasn't like we actually acted like we were professionals or anything like that. We did
Okay.
she was like, oh, I need somebody to play like the American girl that came from the US and is like hanging out here like in front of a Christmas tree, because Puerto Ricans back then, they didn't celebrate like Santa Claus. What they would celebrate was the Three Kings.
Yeah.
So she was like, oh, I need somebody to do that. And I literally was like, I volunteer. Like I was born in New York. I am the one that constantly visits the US. I was one, like a lot of my classmates that did speak English, but I was one of the most like I guess fluent ones. And I was like, oh, like that would be cool. And maybe I can give, like my take on a little bit like American things and stuff. And literally my teacher was like, oh no, you can't do it because you don't look white. And I was like,
What?
I kid you not. She said those words, and my mom was ready. She was like, "What did she say about my baby?" And I was like, "Mom, it's okay." I was like,
That's
"It's okay." I was just offering because I figured I could give some insight. But she was like, "No, like I need somebody that's like light-eyed and like blonde hair." And then the one, like the two people that we had, they had like a bit of an accent when they spoke English. Which again, it's not that it's a bad thing at all, but it was just like usually people that come directly from the states that were born and raised there do not have like a Hispanic accent. So I was like, "What?"
right.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Wow.
Or like
Yeah.
I think
They had me be like a little brat in the play. And I was like,
no, that's ridiculous.
yeah.
Were you gonna say something, Jaden?
Oh no, I mean, I was just gonna say, I mean, that's just generations of like learned behavior. So like people think, that's okay, that, that like, oh, well, this is what this person is supposed to look like. That's what people have embedded in their heads. So it's just that's something we need to try to revert back to. Like, no, that's not the case. Not
Right.
not every person gonna look like that light-eyed, blonde hair type person that's like, you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Right. And it makes me kind of upset that like I'm happy that he's, the first to win an Emmy, but I don't know if you guys know Jarrell Jerome from When They See Us.
Yeah.
The
Oh,
first
yes.
Afro-Latino actor
Mhm.
to win Best Actor in a Outstanding Actor in a Primetime Emmy Award. I don't know if I said that right, but he's the first Afro-Latino.
Mhm.
Why is he the first? And that was in 2018. Like, like that's again, we have to give people
Crazy.
the opportunity to act. And some examples of Afro Latinos, if you can't see all this melanin right now, are Celia Cruz, Roberto Clemente, Amara La Negra, Lala Anthony, Victor Cruz, and I could go on and on. Amara, Lala, and Victor always seem to have to remind people that they're Black, but also Latino. Do you guys feel like you have to constantly explain to people that you are both?
I feel like, I guess, yeah, not recently, but there has been times where, I've told people that, yeah, I'm not just Jamaican, I'm also half Panamanian. They're like, oh, really? Like, you're Spanish? Like, I'm like, yeah, it's just, it's back to what we've been saying, every shade, every Spanish people come in every shade, it's not just one type of Spanish looking person. So definitely, probably, yeah, not recently, but definitely have to have, people were shocked. I was like, oh, wow, you're half Panamanian too. Spanish people too, when I talk to a Spanish person, they're like, "Oh, you have Panamanian." Oh, then they start speaking to me in Spanish. I'm like, "Oh, whoa,
You're
whoa,
like,
whoa,
oh,
whoa."
chill, chill.
Yeah, it's not Spanish, but
Right.
yeah. So probably yeah.
Right.
Um, I think for me, I never have actually had that issue. Hispanics usually are always able to tell that I'm Hispanic, I think because I do look like quite Dominican. Um, Even when I have my curly hair, more times than not, they're still able to tell that I am Dominican. Um, but the only times I've ironically had to tell people that I'm Hispanic is when I'm around Black people, because they usually assume that I'm just mixed. So they just think that I'm like black and white. So then when I start, I don't know, like if I say something like, oh, I like Bad Bunny, or, like things that
Right. Right.
Hispanics are really into right now,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, hold up, you're Spanish? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh, I thought you were mixed. And I was like, I mean, I guess I technically am. Like,
Mm,
Yeah.
my
but
mom gets the opposite because she's not that much darker than you. And people are like, oh, like you're Hispanic, like you don't look like it. And she's like, what does that mean? So
Yeah.
it's what we've been saying this whole episode. Yeah, we just gotta educate people. And I used to get mad because I'm just like, how are you gonna tell me? Oh, I used to hate when people were like, you're not Hispanic, you're just black. You're trying to be Hispanic. I'm like, what does that? Why would I? I'm proud of my blackness. Why would I want to be something that? Why would I tell you
really
something I'm not?
trying.
You know?
Yeah, it's just ignorance. Like people don't understand. Like they're mixes. Like you just like it's
Right.
not
We're
just
not all
like
the same
it's
thing.
not one set in stone thing. Like
The colonizers dropped us off in different locations.
yeah, exactly. I don't know what that's why I don't know why people don't understand. Like you got dropped off at Haiti, Panama, the U.S. Like they dropped us off everywhere. So there's
Right.
gonna be
And not
everywhere.
and black doesn't just mean like you said before. It doesn't just mean black American. Black can mean Afro Latino. You could be Afro Asian.
Mhm.
There's different types. So we just
Yeah.
gotta instead of getting mad, I try to educate people now. Okay, there are many Afro Latinos who don't think they are black. I knew this kid in high school who was Dominican, around my skin color, and had coarse hair, but told me he wasn't black because he quote doesn't live in the hood. What do you say to people who think like this? Like, Latinos who they're physically black like us, but they don't claim it, like they only claim the European or the indigenous.
Okay. Whew, man, I don't even know where to start. First of all, that was just an ignorant statement. Like that. What you said? Because he's not from the hood. Like
Yes.
black, there are black. Okay, I think the problem is people think black is one sort of black. Being black is one is sorry. Well, let me get this up correct. People think being black is one type of way. Like there's one way of being black, which is
Right.
not the case. I think people think like, oh, you do this, this, and this, so that means that you're black. That's not the case. Like being black is what you are and whatever you want to do. Like you could be black and watch anime. You can be black and like to do ballet. You can be black and like art. Like I think people think that if I do if I don't do things that are stereotypically black, then I'm not black. So I
Right.
think that's
We're
just where
not
that comes from.
monolith. We're
That
not
whole you're not from the hood, so I'm not black. No, being black is anything. So that's
right.
definitely the first part. And then I'm sorry, what was the second part?
I was just gonna say,
Or
why
what was the second part of that question?
why do you think people that are Latino that are black, they don't want to claim that or like they're not proud of it? Where do you
I
think
feel
that
like
comes from?
it's definitely this like, being black was not cool, I'm guessing, back like way a long time ago. So I feel like that is still instilled in the minds of parents who pass that on to their kids, who pass that on to their kids, and so forth, so forth. So I feel like that notion of like, oh no, I'm not black. Like you remember? Did you ever see that guy? He was like, I know black. I'm
Yes.
Spanish. I'm no black. Like That's the thing. Like they think like, oh no, I'm not black. Like I'm Puerto Rican. Like I'm Dominican. Like, you know. But the thing is, you are. Like you are black.
You're not white.
That's so that's why I think I think it starts at the home where, you know, they build that notion that, oh, you know, I'm not black, I'm not Spanish, and then pass that on for generations. And that's how that becomes a thing, basically.
Right.
I think for me, like, I I was probably one of those people. I mean, I never actively like rejected saying like, oh yeah, like I have African features. I never had an issue with that. But I always felt very weird saying that I was like Afro-Latino, that I was black, just because I was very like closed-minded at the time. So I thought that black was like the stereotypical like American black person, like I don't know, like let's say listening to R&B or something, or like enjoying hip hop. And I was like, my favorite artist is Lady Gaga. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't really feel like
Right.
that.
I don't really like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, like I listen to all kinds of music, but you know, like the things that I was most exposed to was either like Spanish music or just pop music, because that's what would play in PR. So I was never really listening to like you know, like more stereotypically black
Hip
music.
hop artists.
Um, yeah, so that was like one thing. Also, I think just being in Puerto Rico, nobody ever said like, "Oh, you're white, you're black." It was just like we're all just Puerto Rican, and that was kind of it. So we never really thought that deep into it. But I do remember sometimes getting the comments of like, "Oh, you're pretty for a dark girl," which I used to get quite often. And I remember I never really knew what that meant. And even my mom was like, "She's just pretty, period." And then I was like, "I don't get why that's relevant. Why are they telling me I'm cute for a dark girl?"
Something's not right.
Compliment.
And then my mom wouldn't want to feed it because she didn't want to like instill it like this is relevant in your mind. So she was like, "Don't worry about it, Keeana. They just think you're pretty, and that's what matters." And I was like, "Okay." Like, you know, like,
Right. Yeah, let's unpack
think,
that. That's very
yeah, I think definitely moving over here helped me a lot. With recognizing like, oh, hold up, like maybe I am like, you know, more into this culture than I thought I was. Cause like there's people that are having like the same hair struggles that I am. Like over there in Puerto Rico, I remember I used to lie about how often I wash my hair because I didn't want people to think I was disgusting. Because so many people over there had
different hair.
European like hair or like indigenous hair, so their hair was naturally a lot more oilier than mine was. Mine was like I have curly hair naturally. Well, I know right now it does not look like that, but but like before having straightened my hair right now, like I hadn't like straightened out my hair in like a year and a half, so most of the time my hair is curly. um but I had never had people around me that were like, oh yeah, I get the struggle of like trying to get products that like help detangle your hair, or I get the struggle of like when you do stretch out your hair, it's like 4 hours long. Everybody around me was like, oh, I just detangled it, I blow dried it in less than an hour and it's done. And I was like, what? And I was like, I don't even wash my hair every week or every other week because of all the effort that I have to put into it. But since I never really heard people talking about that, I would lie. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, I obviously wash my hair every 3 days. Duh.
Right.
At all. And I think unfortunately, similarly to like what you were asking afterwards, I think because at least in PR, I wasn't really exposed to people like having, I guess, like certain black experiences, like you know, the hair struggle, which is like a
Yeah.
double-edged sword because you have like this gorgeous mane, but at the same time, there's so much work to put into it.
Yeah.
But I think also like us just not being exposed to it, and just like hearing people, I guess, glorify everything that I was not, also made me like kind of like reject that side a bit. And even people around me that were like more African looking, they were kind of the same way. Like I realized that guys were a lot more open to like embracing their blackness than girls were, but I think it's because girls, again, like, you know, the beauty standards were very European like, so they were like, no, like I'm not like that. Oh, my hair, like it doesn't take that long. Oh yeah, my curls, like my hair is really not that curly. It just looks curly like occasionally, and it's like okay. But
Yeah, I think it all
I
starts,
think it helped.
yeah, I think it all starts at home. You know,
Yeah.
I think I'm so glad that my mom always told my sister, like, you know, you're beautiful and like your hair is not, it takes a while to do, but it's not a problem. It's not ugly. And I
Yeah.
think that colorism, slavery, you know, the racial hierarchy, you know, if you're closer to white, you're more beautiful, paper bag test. And yeah, just you gotta educate yourself in like, yes, it's hard and kind of dangerous right now to be black, but it's beautiful and
And
it's a good
dangerous,
thing.
unfortunately.
You know, and our culture, like, let's say whether you're Afro Latino or just regular Latino, our culture is rooted in African, like it's African roots. The music, the food, our clothes, like traditional clothing. That's not European. That's African. So you should
At
be
all.
proud. You know,
Aside from the Bible, that ain't it.
right? Like you should be proud of that. You know, the indigenous people, the African people, and yeah, you know, they want to look like us. They want to be tan. They want, you know, come to our countries for vacation. So we should take pride in our people and our history.
I agree.
There's a term in our community called mejor la raza, which translates to better the race, meaning we as Latinos need to marry and have children with white or light skinned people. So our children have pelo bueno, good hair, small noses, and nice light skin. Why is there so much anti-blackness in our community? And how do you guys think that we can stop it?
Um, I think my experience is a little bit complex. Um, so I'm gonna give a little bit of backstory on my grandmother, and then I'm gonna talk about like my mom having married my father.
Yeah.
So my grandmother, she is looks very, very African, like 100%. She looks African, Dominican African, and she's like, "Ugh, she's here."
Okay.
Yeah, but she was one of the few family members that had like those very African looking like features, and she like the way that she tells me is that she always remembers always being like rejected a bit like because she looked different, or just like hearing a lot of like passive aggressive comments of like, oh, like la negra, but it wasn't like you can say like la negra with it being a negative thing, but the way like their tone was very like negative, like, oh, the black one, like that one. So that was something that she experienced a lot. And even now, like years later, she does tend to like really, I guess, like glorify a lot of European like things. And I think it's because of how she was raised. Like she was so rejected from it that she automatically assumes like if you are anything that is similar to black, immediately you're going to be rejected, you're going to be ostracized, you're not going to get anybody that wants you in their life and like their family, any of that. So even like when I straightened my hair now and she saw me recently, she was like, oh my gosh, Kiana, she was like, you look so cute like that. She's like, did you know you look better this way? And like even she like, yeah, like she says that, and she's like, I don't know why you don't straighten it out more, like if you do it more the easier it is. And I was like, grandma, but the more I do it the more my curls die, and I don't want that. And she's like, okay, Kiana, like here you go, like being your little radical self. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be radical, it's literally how my hair grows. What do you mean? so so I think for her, like her experience and what I've seen from her, it's definitely like rejecting, I guess, like the suffering that comes with being black. Then ironically enough, when it came to my parents, my mom did get a lot of that commentary because my mom looks more European. She does have like African curves, I would say, but overall she looks a lot more European versus my dad, he looks completely African. So I learned a few years ago that apparently when my father was going to marry my mom, he was constantly told exactly that. Why are you going to ruin the race? Like bro, like you're already like light skinned, like why would you want to marry him? Like he's like, you're gonna come out with like this freaking dark ass like tan baby, and like why would you do that? Like it was just like this whole thing. And to her she was like, aren't you guys just like happy that I found somebody? Like what?
She loves.
Yeah, and I actually didn't know about it for a long time, because my parents are divorced. So my father, he still lives over here in New York, and my mom, she lives in Puerto Rico. So I was raised around on my Puerto Rican side of the family. But the crazy thing is, I never knew that until a few years ago, and I was like, hold up, what? And my dad was like, yeah, I was constantly getting the hate from your family. They were constantly trying to be like mean to me. He was like, they were never like outwardly nasty, but they also weren't like the super welcoming kind. And he was like, and I'm pretty sure it's because I look black. And I was like, oh my God. So then I asked my mom about it. And she was like, oh yeah, that was a thing. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, and nobody told me. And they're
Right.
like,
I didn't know
what's the
this.
They
point?
probably didn't want to traumatize you at such a young age.
Yeah, because to them they were like, what was the point? Like you're already living with them. And the crazy thing is that out of all of the like, I guess like my generation of cousins and stuff, I was the only one that ended up being raised with them. So it was like such a slap in the face to them because they were talking all this crap about like, oh, we don't want like the little tan kid. And now I'm the one that they're like, oh my gosh, where's little Kiana? Like she hasn't come around in so long. And I'm like, you guys are freaking liars. Like, I cannot do this.
Right.
But I think it's also similar to like what my grandmother had experienced because they had the opposite side of the coin. So they had more European like looking like features. So they were constantly like getting more opportunities like, oh, like you're so pretty, could you be in like our magazine, could you be in this, and so on. So I think for them they were like, why would you want to ruin that, like all these opportunities that we have by, you know, mixing with somebody that's darker and looking more black.
That's horrible. That's, and I want to say like it's okay to marry whoever you want. Like,
Of course.
racial, you like white people, you like whatever. But like, why are you dating that person? Why are you having children with that person? Is it because you're in love, or is it because you're trying
It's
to
a fetish for you.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, like is it a fetish? Like, oh, I want kids with light skin and just
Yeah. Like that's not okay. That's not, I don't know how else to put it. That's not okay. You should be
There's actually, it's funny that you were saying that, because there's actually the saying in Puerto Rico, which is like, I'm gonna say it in Spanish, is "Y tu abuela dónde está," which essentially translates into "Where's your grandmother?" And it's from this long poem. I forgot the author, which really goes to show my awful Puerto Rican side. But I forgot the author. But the whole poem is about like somebody thinking that they're like all of that because they're European looking, like because they have the light skin, the light eyes, and it's like, but look at your grandmother. She was like 100% black. So stop projecting like, your culture and so on, because we're a melting pot. So
yes. Like you might be super light, but you might have a black grandmother or black grandfather. Also, because we're so mixed, our community, you could like have a bunch of light people and then pop out with a brown baby. That happens all the
yeah, it
time.
does. It all depends on the lottery of the genes. Like that's just
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah, like
even
your mom,
I
if she
think this.
married a guy that matched her skin tone, you could have came out the same color or even darker. Like stuff like that happens all the
you
time.
literally never know. I have one of my little cousins. She's the exact same mix as I am. Like her mom is Puerto Rican, light skin looking, like, and her father is similar to my dad, like black looking. And she has curly hair. She actually has coarser hair than I do when it's curly, but her hair is like blonde. She has light eyes. She has super light skin tone. But like aside from her hair, like, and maybe aside from her nose and her hair, you would just think that she's like some European girl. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, you're gonna get that beautiful brown baby whether you like it or not.
You cannot reject it, honey.
Yeah.
Okay, what is your advice for kids growing up that are Black and Latino or Afro-Latino that feel insecure about how they look and feel like they don't fit in with the Latino community?
Uh, I think what kids need to understand is that every like I think we've been saying this the whole podcast is that everyone is going to look different. Not so if you're Afro Latino whatever you feel like you don't belong, just know like there's I promise you there's 100 people that look just like you in whatever area in whatever country you're at or from, and you think, oh, I'm darker than the rest of these people, I'm lighter than the like there's I promise you there's a many people that look just like you. So I think that's what they need to understand, that
Yes.
everyone is going to come in different shades, and that you know you're not gonna there's no one way to look at
Yes,
the end
there
of the
are
day.
about 22, 23 Spanish speaking countries. There are Black people in all those
Every
countries.
single one, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think um I guess for me I would say better side. I would say particularly when it comes to little girls, definitely show black joy. Show black joy. I mean, I guess for both, like boys and girls in between. Um show black joy. Don't let everything that they see that's related to like blackness to just be like, a sad story of discrimination or abuse. Like those things are relevant 100% because it is part of the history and it is part of what our current climate as well. But at the same time, that's not the only thing that we are. I definitely think that we have to see a lot of black joy, of black success as well. Expose children to that. And also, like when it comes to little girls, in my opinion, try I really think that they like people should try to show them to embrace who they already are, like as they are, as they're born. Because I know that something I see a lot, particularly in Dominican, like in my Dominican side of the family, I've seen a lot of people that have their little girls, and they're immediately already like straightening out their hair when they're like 4 or 3 years old. And not saying that that's a bad thing, because like right here, my hair right now is stretched out. I'm not trying to be a hypocrite, but like that child is 4. Like, does she really ask for that, or are you just doing that? Like, I don't know. To me, it just seems a little bit iffy. And I really think if you show them to like love who they are and also put them around people that look like them as well, definitely helps because like my cousin, the one that's lighter skinned, that I'm like aside from her nose and her hair, literally I'm the only person in the family that wears her hair natural. Well, me and two other cousins, but she mostly sees me. I'm the only other person in the family that she sees that like wears her hair natural. So
Wow.
even though her mom has curly hair and her mom encourages her to like love her hair, she constantly tells me, she's like, oh, mommy says that like she has pretty curly hair, but she's constantly straightening it. I've asked if I could have it straightened, but she says no, not yet. And she's like, but your hair looks just like mine. And wow, it looks so nice. Like, it's insane how much they absorb from us and what they see. And just like the love that you put into yourself as well. Like, whenever I have my curly hair and stuff, like sometimes I've told her, I'm like, oh my God, I haven't washed my hair yet. Like, I really don't want to. And she was like, I hate washing my hair too because I have so many tangles. I'm like, yeah, girl. I'm like, but the outcome though, we look so good, right? And she's like, yeah, we do. And I'm like, okay, that's what matters. So I'm like, let's not,
Yeah.
try to like pour it into like some negative bowl or anything. Like, let's try to focus on the positive, at least for now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. I think having someone to relate, like an older cousin, older uncle, older aunt,
Yeah.
yeah, that's important. And giving, Black children like Black toys, Black dolls, give them Black TV shows to watch. Because for me, it was like I was watching Disney Channel, and there's not a lot of Black people on there after certain,
Yeah.
after That's So
Most
Raven,
of them are not.
Yeah.
right? And I'm like,
Proud Family after that, I was like, all right, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but
That's
even
it.
when you look at it, like all the TV shows that they had, we literally only had like what That's So Raven compared to what Phil and
Uh,
the Future, Hannah Montana,
Montana,
Wizard of
What's
Oz,
Her
all of
Face,
that.
High School Musical. Yeah, like it's
McGuire, like all these white people. I got no hate to the white people, but
no
it's
hate, but it's like, damn, like the only person I could like for me, it was like Chad, the Black guy from High School Musical. I always try to find that one Black person to, that I look like, and it shouldn't be like that. Like there should be more
yeah.
Black programming. And what you said before, the trauma, it's not healthy for us and like children, Black children, to see that and hear about it all the time. Like let's hear about good Black stories, and like our history doesn't start with slavery. Like we were
Yeah.
we were
That's
living,
absolutely right. Yes.
but
We're
way,
kings and queens at one point.
mm-hmm.
yeah, kings and queens. So I think watch documentaries, read books, and just like you said, educate the young Black children, Afro Latino children to love themselves, because the world is not going to do it. They're going to have to do it themselves.
They're
So
not gonna see it. I mean,
But
I think now maybe a little bit more, but
I
at
think it's
least
also,
our
we need to
time,
create
I
our
was not
own.
seeing it.
yeah,
Also, if we create our own, not wait for the man to do it, we should do it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
right,
Podcasts, tell our stories, start our own television channels, and all that stuff.
right. That's why I started this
Definitely.
podcast to
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Like your pod. Yeah.
right, because I don't really see, I have to really dig deep for certain conversations. And, why don't I just have it myself and invite two people that I know and that are educated on this and have good experiences to speak about this? Because I know it's not just us three that are saying these things and living these experiences. So, what does being Afro Latino or just Latino in general mean to you?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's lit, honestly. Like I said,
Yeah.
I think from when we first discussed it, like it's lit. Like I love being in this culture. I love hearing different stories about my culture. I love hearing my dad speak Spanish to my grandmother. Like I love it all. Like I just think it's very important that we embrace our culture and definitely like let it be known that yes, I am half Jamaican. Yes, I am half Panamanian, and this is just who I am. And, I'm not gonna try to conform or try to mold myself into something I'm not. This is what I am, and this is what I'm gonna keep always preaching for myself.
Right. Facts.
Yeah.
Facts.
I think for me, it's definitely a mixture of like resilience and joy, because our ancestors are even our parents or grandparents. They've survived so much, like, and they've just their lives. Like sometimes I literally think about how we were all raised so differently. Like my grandmother was raised in DR, my father was raised here, and I was raised in Puerto Rico. I'm like, we all had such different experiences, and we all survived, different issues that we may have during our time and so on. So I definitely think resilience is one of them, and just awesome joy. Just because like we're so rich, you know what I mean? Like there's just so much to us. Just like us three, we all have had such different experiences, and we're all just mixed Hispanics. Like
Right.
just
And we're
we're
also able to relate.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I would definitely call it like resilience and joy, probably.
I like that. I like that. I think for me, just love. You know, whenever I step into like a Latino party or when I go back home to the Bronx, I just feel love, you know, parties and the
It's a great
food.
time.
Good food, great food.
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh, yes, food.
I don't think
I
we
love
brought up the
my
food.
home.
Food is amazing. I think yeah,
yes. I can eat
food is.
food
I love the food.
forever. But I want to try different. I would love to try Panamanian food. I would love to try Dominican food.
There's a Panamanian restaurant in Brooklyn. It's called El Kelso. You should definitely check it
El
out.
queso.
Yeah, El Kelso. It's Kelso. It's good.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna check that out. Yeah. I'm gonna check because I think it's also important that like to love our own cultures, but to branch out. Like there's so many
Yeah.
different, like I want to go to Chile or I want to go to Bolivia and like Cuba and like Dominican Republic. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
branch out,
Whereas,
like learn from your friends because there shouldn't be beef. We're one family. Like we're one.
The
You
world is
we're
already
one
trying to
race.
tear us down. Why add to it?
Right. They wanted to divide us and make us beef with no, we're not doing that. Thank you guys for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. These
Thank you for
conversations
having me.
are important.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can follow Keeana on Instagram at Keeana, her name, and Jaden on Instagram at BLVCK Wood_. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and be sure to leave a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good